You're listening to 3 Days Through the Wood, a novel by Bear Mawasagi, as read by the author. Chapter 5. Flutterby, my darlings. Bright red claws of light raked across the sky as the sun fell slowly to the horizon, sweeping aside the grayish blues and burning them to the dull purple of a fading bruise. Long whooping calls echoed in the quiet as light and life faded from the forest for another night. Deeper still through those shrouded trees, the insects were waking. Pill and Chirp kept to the roads after the departure of their newfound acquaintances, and had yet to stumble on any others since. The road wasn't quite so devoid of company as to be frightening, however. The feeling that settled among the forest was one of gentle tranquility, of the sort one might feel when resting after a hard day's work, or, in the case of Pill and Chirp, a hard day's walk. They were still walking, of course, with no sign coming of the wood's abatement. Having nowhere else to be but forward, they were still marching along, passing the time with bits of conversation that slowly dimmed along with the sun and coming night, and perhaps in respect to the vast and growing silence of the trees. Every leaf had a story to tell. At least that was the impression Chirp gave. Every root seemed to have a name and history in his eyes. Pill was grateful that the young boy could so adeptly hold both sides of a conversation by himself, because there was very little he could add to the vivid imaginings being told to him. While Chirp chirped on, Pill was left to linger on the advice given to him by Rover. What matters is that you take the time to find yourself. Pill knew the meaning of his words had been mistaken, but Rover had dug to the truth of his issues regardless. He was somewhat at a loss as to how to proceed, however. How was he supposed to find himself, he wondered, when he was a stranger to everything about his own life? "Mom told me not to eat those ones," Chirp said loudly. He stepped over a patch of deceptively plain-looking leaves. "Bad food, they make you all itchy on the inside and outside, too. Don't roll around in them." "I'll try my best," said Pill. "Really," Chirp stressed, "it's not fun." "Are you speaking from experience?" Pill teased. Chirp went red. He kept his face screwed into an expression of utmost seriousness. "No." Pill smiled at him. "Once," Chirp admitted, "but not anymore. Mom got really mad at me last time, and I was itchy for days." Pill and Chirp navigated carefully around the ivy extending to devour the road. It was actually more ivy than road at this point, with only a little sideways path they could sidle along, so long as they made sure to keep one foot exactly in front of the other. Less and less were they following a trail through the woods than they were tracking a groove through the leaves. Maybe it was an animal trail, Pill thought. It was another of those funny little things. Even as Pill struggled to remember anything about himself, he had no problem at all thinking of what sorts of horned and antlered creatures might roam through this stretch of forest when no one else was watching. He could recall the names and sights and cries of everything in the wood, call them to mind in vivid detail. Maple leaves fluttering over stilled winds were more familiar to him than his own hands. His fingers were soft, almost dainty, and stick-thin as well, but there was a trace of hard work to them which set Pill to wondering. They also looked stained somehow, he thought, glowing softly red in the dying sun, but he told himself that this was just the light of the forest filtering through the leaves. "Oh no," said a voice from somewhere ahead. It was loud and panicked and high, but with the distinct soprano of a rather unmanly-sounding man. "Oh my, oh no, 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 no! This is terrible!" Pill craned his head, trying to see through the brush before them. Chirp tried to do the same. "Did you hear that?" he asked quietly. Chirp nodded grimly. "Are you okay, mister?" he yelled. Pill winced. He tapped Chirp by the shoulder and fell low, trying to explain the necessity of keeping quiet via a series of small, complicated, and ultimately meaningless hand gestures. "Who?" said the voice through the trees. "What? Who's there? Hello?" "Hello?" Chirp called back. Pill tapped him more frantically, trying to drill the message into him now with a frantically improvised sort of Morse code, but that too proved fruitless. Chirp leapt over the brambles of ivy and took off toward the man. Knowing he couldn't leave the boy alone, Pill reluctantly followed. They found a befuddled and rather sad-looking man sitting in a sad little lump atop a root bent like a bench. His clothes were an odd choice for hiking, Pill thought, not at all suited to the wood. Short brown trousers rose past his ankles, showing off argyle socks pulled to the knee. He wore a diamond-checked sweater vest of green and white and more brown, with a brown button collar popping up from beneath it. His eyes were round and panicked, looking near 3 times their size through thick, circular glasses. He looked as if he'd been crying. Pill didn't think this was the sort of person Grizzly had tried to warn them about, but he didn't want to stick around and find out for sure either.
"Oh no," said the crying man at their approach. "And here comes another misfortune to visit upon me. A pair of young hunters, poachers perhaps, here to scoop my prize from beneath my wings. Bah, on with you then, vile thieves. Claim my lost glories from me if you must, but please, I beg you, spare at least my clothing. I have so little left to me, you see, and if I may, I dare say such finery would ill-suit the highwayman profession. No, it's ill-fitting to the trade." "I'm not a highway professman," said Chirp. "I'm Chirp."
"We're not thieves, sir," said Pill. From the blistering look that the sad man had been giving them, however, he did wish he was at least a bit of a bully. The tears on his face dried up sharply, and the sad, lumpy, brown-clad man raked a sleeve across his face to wipe up the falls of mucus pouring from his nose.
"Oh, excellent, then," he whispered. "Yes, this is most well-timed, actually. Fortuitous, even. Virtuous young men you must be, angels from the heavens sent to aid weary travelers through their trials and tribulations." "I'm an angel?"
Chirp asked Pill. "We're not angels."
"I didn't mean in the literal sense, of course, merely allegorical? Or is that metaphor? Simile, perhaps?"
The odd man smiled at them meekly.
"I must admit literary articles and the peculiarities of grammar were never my forte. I'm primarily an entomologist, you see, by interest if not exactly by trade."
"What does that mean?" Chirp asked.
"It means I lack the funding to make research into a viable career," the would-be entomologist moaned. "Nor do I have the customer base, or dare I say even the nerve to apply my trade in a more practical application. So, as it stands, my passion remains only a vigorously pursued hobby."
Chirp scratched his head.
"I meant, what does entomologist mean?"
"It means he studies bugs," said Pill, wondering where he had learned that.
"Quite right, my boy," said the entomologist.
He snapped his fingers before adjusting his glasses, which slid his eyes halfway up his face.
"And now I can see just what a clever pair of young men you are. Yes, indeed. And clever men, well, they recognize opportunities when one crosses their path, as well as the risks of letting those opportunities slip them by. So, if I may, and if it's true that the two of you are not in fact brigands here to pilfer my possessions, perhaps you would be interested in helping me reclaim a particularly valued and prized, collection."
"Sure," Chirp shrugged. Pill held up a hand. He was trying to follow the entomologist's train of thought, but it felt like chasing someone down a spiral stairwell with no idea where the bottom might actually lay. "Before we agree to anything," he said, shooting a sharp look at Chirp, "what exactly is it that you're asking us to do?"
"I need you to recover a rare and valued, if only to me and only in these woods, missing piece of my most favorite collection. And by piece I do mean the whole, of course, not a piece of the missing piece of the whole. They're not complete without one another, you see, so you will need to be thorough."
Pill sighed. He was starting to think Chirp's penchant for stating the obvious might actually be a gift. The entomologist seemed cursed with an inability to say anything of substance, and used as many words as possible to do it. Pill could feel a headache growing. "What are we actually looking for, though?" The entomologist scratched his baby-smooth face and smiled.
"Oh, right, of course," he said. "I have a habit of getting ahead of myself, you see, lost in the particulars before grasping the goal, as it were. A bit like reading a map before knowing your destination."
He laughed. Neither of them laughed with him. At some point he must have stood up as well, but Pill hardly noticed. Even when standing, the entomologist only rose to his chin.
"I need you to recover my butterflies."
"Yes!" yelled Chirp, who grabbed with an enthusiastic crunch at a nearby pile of leaves.
"Got one!"
The entomologist paled.
"No, they're really much more vibrant than those leaves. And please, if you do happen to find them, don't go grabbing at them with your hands. They don't like the oils, you see, or the exuberastic force. No, best you be using one of these."
He took from a satchel at his side 3 sticks that he started to screw together. A 4th, laced with a fine white mesh, was bent into a hoop and fixed on its end. "You want us to catch butterflies with a giant net," Pill said flatly, "that you just happen to be carrying around with you."
"Tools of the trade," said the entomologist, affronted. "Well, tools of the hobbyist, but not for lack of trying."
"We're in the middle of a forest," said Pill. "There's leaves and branches and poison ivy everywhere. We're almost tripping over ourselves every time we leave the road, and if you haven't noticed, there isn't a lot of road left. It's getting darker by the minute, and you want us to go running around with a giant net looking for butterflies?"
"Tools of the hobbyist," the entomologist stressed, "and I have another." "Deal,"
said Chirp. He grabbed the newly built net and brought its full force to bear against an ill-fortuned leaf. Scraps of red blew over the forest wind.
No, the entomologist said, raising his hands. Not like that. Softer, you see, gently, with refined technique, you understand? We don't want to go crunching our little friends now, do we? We want them preserved.
Oh, said Chirp, who had been advancing menacingly toward an unsuspecting shrub.
Sorry. Nothing's been done that can't be forgiven, said the entomologist.
He turned to Pill.
How about it, young sir? There's a pretty penny in it for you if you help me gather my specimens.
Pill wasn't sure what good money would do him out in the forest, and it must have shown on his face, because the entomologist went from eagerly asking for his help to desperately pleading with a shift of his sad little eyes. Pill sighed. It sounds like Chirp is already helping you. If you trust him to do it right, then I suppose it's okay. Just stay where I can see you, okay, Chirp? He turned back to the entomologist. Say we do this for you. Can you offer us something better than a penny?
I've already offered a small share of my remaining fortune, said the entomologist, holding his hand to his chest. But I suppose a fair turn for freely given aid is only proper. Yes, very well. What is it you would ask of me?
Chirp was marching off toward the edge of the wood, prancing over ivy as he brought his net down on all the falling leaves of the forest. Do you live around here? Pill asked quietly. In a feat surely born of his imagination, he could have sworn for a moment that the trees all bent closer to listen to him. I need directions. It's getting late and we need to get to town. If we can get your butterflies back, I'd really appreciate it if you could show us the way.
Town? Said the entomologist. You need to get to town?
Yeah.
Well, of course I can help you there, he exclaimed. If that was your price, you should have named it immediately. And here I was worrying about the exorbitant depths of your potential extortion. Oh, how far my beautiful genuses might have flown off in the meantime. Yes, of course, price agreed. Now let the hunt begin.
He screwed together the second net with gusto as he spoke and handed it to Pill.
If they were geniuses, they wouldn't have flown away,
Chirp yelled from the woods.
Got one?
Neither Pill nor the entomologist bothered to inspect the cataclysm Chirp had inflicted on some surely innocent tree.
Geniuses, the entomologist corrected him. And, as I was about to say before your rather hurtful, if unintentional barb, time is of the essence. It's not entirely untrue that Denius Plexippus aren't the smartest of creatures, granted, but they have very finely honed instincts. They're going somewhere they need to be, even if they don't understand why, and that means they'll be looking to find water before embarking for a warmer climate. That will carry them very far from here if we aren't quick. We should look for any streams or ponds if we can. Where you can find water, you can always find vibrant boticulture. What does that mean? Asked Chirp. It means flowers, said the entomologist.
No, it doesn't, said Pill. Boticulture doesn't mean anything at all. It's not a real word.
Well, I meant for it to mean flowers, the entomologist said meekly.
Chirp was already on the prowl for more boticulture, however, and he vanished through a stretch of tall grass. I told you to stay in sight, Pill yelled.
I got one,
Chirp yelled back distantly. Pill sighed and gripped his net. I hope you brought more of these, he said to the entomologist.
No, I've only ever needed the one, actually. You're holding my only spare.
Then I hope you're good with your hands, said Pill, grabbing the odd little man by the shoulder and setting him to march. If we gotta search these woods, then you're coming with us.
But the oils!
Forest leaves crunched underfoot in that crisp and satisfying way one can only truly experience when nearing autumn's end. The long season was coming to its slow conclusion, painting the forest in rich golds and oranges that swam over a vast sea of tall but dying grass, all of it scorched red in the shadows of the setting sun. Fluttering wings and branch-like antlers and all manner of scurrying things caught in the light as distant life traveled broadly around the three travelers. Chirp left a veritable trail of destruction in his wake, kicking up leaves and pulling down branches, mistaking every bit of shifting orange shadow for a pair of fluttering wings and crying out triumphantly as he smashed them into the dirt with his net. Pill walked more reverently through the wood. The forest belonged to the wild things he knew, and he wished to be a courteous guest while in their domain.
It's a good thing I'm wearing such thick socks, the entomologist scoffed some time into their walk. I wouldn't have believed the uncouth nature of these untamed trails if you'd told me.
It's called the wild for a reason, Pill snipped. The only trail is the one Chirp's leaving for us, so pay attention. I don't want to get lost when we have to find the road again.
You mean you haven't been keeping track yourself?
Pill smiled deviously. He could find the road again easy enough simply by following the sun. He had kept it to their back this whole walk. He didn't need to tell that to the entomologist, however.
Got one,
Chirp yelled from somewhere ahead.
Oh my,
The entomologist moaned again.
He really is going to be saying that all night, isn't he?
Hopefully not, said Pill. He used the butt of his net to pry through a large bush. Chirp had already charged through it, but he didn't share the same fear of spiders and worms and other crawling things finding his way into his clothing as Pill did. I'd rather be out of here before night falls.
Well, it can't be long now, said the entomologist. I'm sure we'll find my darling soon. Got one! Is it wise that he be leading the way?
Probably not, Pill shrugged. But good luck trying to stop him. He slowed. Something ahead caught his attention. It was just a small glimpse of movement somewhere beyond the trees, but it was there. Bright and orange and utterly unlike a falling leaf, it was there, drifting between the trees and gliding along the air, bobbing gently along the wind. A sharp snort of anticipation from the entomologist told Pill that they had found their quarry.
Be very careful.
The plea came in a wheeze, at a pitch usually reserved for dogs. Pill nodded, raising his net. They were quiet not so much for the sake of the hunt, whose target had no mind for such complex plans and speech, but for Chirp, whose sense for such things was almost as undeveloped. If he knew there were an actual, real butterfly fluttering nearby, soon the entire forest would know it as well, and then they would be even further from catching it. Pill's feet tread softly over the dirt, never really rising so that they never really fell, instead sweeping over the floor. Rather than crunching leaves underfoot, he brushed them aside with a slow swish-swish through the humus in a practiced manner he couldn't remember learning. The butterfly, a monarch by the look of it, remained oblivious to him. So too, thankfully, did Chirp. A long call sounded through the wood, sending a chill through Pill's body. It cried out long and low in a song heralding the coming night. Pill pegged it for a loon and realized they must be near water after all. He tried not to wonder too hard about where he had learned all these things, keeping focused instead on the hunt. Chirp froze in place at the eerie sound, however, as did the entomologist, whose understanding of nature didn't seem to extend beyond anything with less than 6 legs. Got one, Pill whispered, and, as they all eventually do, the monarch fell to the man with the bigger stick.
Oh, delight, said the entomologist, clapping madly.
His thrice-sized eyes looked like tea saucers through his lenses as he studied the captive creature.
This is absolutely one of mine. I would recognize that pattern anywhere.
Chirp came clomping over through the bush, and by instinct both Pill and the entomologist moved to block the fall of his net.
Wow,
he said, trying to get around them.
And on your first try, too.
I've caught butterflies before, Chirp, said Pill. He realized, with a small surprise, that the statement felt true.
You must be a pro,
Chirp added in awe. I don't think people actually get paid for this kind of thing.
Not to contradict you, but the boy is right, said the entomologist. You're being paid for this right now, in fact, which technically makes you a professional.
His smile dimmed significantly.
Which means you've accomplished my dream before I have.
Wow, said Chirp.
I wish I could be a professional butterfly catcher. As do I.
Just catch one without crushing it and you will be, said Pill. This, however, might have been the wrong thing to say, because Chirp took off with renewed vigor even deeper into the forest, and all the trees shrank in terror at his approach.
That really was the wrong thing to say, wasn't it?
Said the entomologist. Pill would have preferred if he'd said nothing at all.
I suppose we ought to be keeping after him.
Yeah, said Pill. So grab your jar or your cage or whatever you've got to carry this thing and let's go.
Oh, right, yes, immediately.
Immediately, in the parlance of entomologists and other insect enthusiasts, translated as roughly a couple minutes or so. Pill would have expected them to move a little faster, what with a short lifespan and quick movements of their field of interest, but by the time the entomologist was actually ready, Chirp had already swept through the forest around them like a strong rush of wind, visible only through the devastation left in his wake. The entomologist hadn't prepared a jar or a cage or whatever, however, but was instead picking through a small purse of fine and sharp-looking tools. A roll of pins wrapped in delicate felt was prepared on a small board set atop a stump.
My mistake was not doing this sooner, said the entomologist. I won't let the moment slip through my fingers this time.
The monarch struggled pitifully in the net, unable to overpower the delicate mesh. Pill couldn't help but feel guilty. He'd expected the entomologist would only collect his specimens, not kill them. In his mind, he had pictured something like an elaborate greenhouse sanctuary where they could fly freely in safety. The cold nature of the preservation measures left him bereft of such fanciful notions. Ironically enough, they had implanted butterflies in his stomach. "Do you really have to kill it?" he asked meekly.
"Oh, they won't die immediately," the entomologist said cheerfully. "But yes, I do. If I'm to preserve them as they are now in this perfect state, then I must mount them before the rot sets in. You understand."
"Kind of," said Pill. "But wouldn't they be happier flying free?"
"And then what would I be left to study?" asked the entomologist. "What would I be left to appreciate? No, too often perfect moments are gone too quickly, stolen from us by idle distraction. By the time we gather our wits enough to observe and measure and quantify them so that we might replicate that perfection again later, the opportunity is lost. If we're to understand the nature of the world and what makes those fleeting moments so beautiful, then we must preserve them as is. These weren't always butterflies, you know. Once they were small, ugly creatures bound to the indignities of earth and soil in their larval stage. Today they fly, sure, but tomorrow they return again to the earth to rot and vanish from this world. I'm keeping them from that loss, you see, preserving their beauty as is."
"But is that really appreciating them?" Pill asked, watching the butterfly struggle beneath the net. It couldn't escape the mesh, but for the moment it was at least managing to evade the clumsy calipers of the entomologist. "Having wings mounted on the wall isn't the same as seeing them fly. They want to be free. They want to go where it's warm. It's in their nature. Are they even really butterflies anymore if they can't be what they are?"
"Yes," said the entomologist sharply, "and they will be forever, precisely because of what I am doing. I don't expect you to understand the nature of lost perfection. How could you when you've yet liked to experience it yourself? I'm holding on to this beauty to keep it from leaving this world, so that others may enjoy it again in the future."
"But there will always be butterflies," Pill argued. "You just have to know where to look for them. Pinning memories onto a board and watching them through glass isn't the same thing at all. If you just wanted to look at them, you could take a picture."
"As if I have the money for that," the entomologist scoffed.
His tiny instrument finally managed to catch the monarch by its abdomen, and he giggled triumphantly.
"Excellent! Now keep still, please. This next part is very delicate work."
A whirlwind net came crashing down suddenly over his odd little head, sending his wide eyes even wider as he fell to the ground in pain, clutching a rapidly growing goose egg.
"Missed him,"
said Chirp, watching as a leaf fell to the forest floor.
"He was right there and you didn't even see him,"
he admonished Pill before turning back to the woods.
"Anyway, come look, I found more."
The entomologist sat up in a daze. Chirp vanished as quickly as he'd appeared. In the commotion of his sudden attack, however, Pill noticed that the butterfly had wriggled free of the calipers and was starting to fly upward beyond the reach of the net. He took a lazy, half-hearted swing at it just to show that he'd tried, and shrugged when he missed.
"Oh, drat," said the entomologist, still rubbing his head. "That boy really is a nuisance, isn't he? Well, best go see what he's found."
Chirp was running ahead through a patch of tall grass. The entomologist took off nearly as quickly, apparently not wanting to let another opportunity pass him by. Pill tried his best to keep up with the both of them, but lacked their lack of caution. He kept a hand leveled with his face, trying to keep the branches from smashing and slapping at him as he ran through the untamed forest, and held up the net in his other as if the mere sight of it might scare away the spiders and other many-legged things of the wood. He was near blind in the green, trying to follow Chirp and the entomologist more from sound than sight, and so didn't notice when the forest reached up to trip him. His foot slipped off the edge of hard dirt and slicked into something else, and Pill had to throw his whole body forward to keep from falling over. The action came to him automatically, from a lesson learned long ago. He could remember it clearly. In the shadow of his memories, he was young again, holding a large net much like the entomologist's tools of the trade, but it was larger in his child's hand. He ran through tall grass that rose as high as the skyscrapers he had seen in his picture books. His backyard could have been a jungle or a forest preserve in some far-off mountainscape, but he suspected it was only the vivid imagination of his youth in some small field. He heard laughter from on ahead.
"Wait up,"
he cried in that long-ago time.
"Wait for me!"
The net was heavy in his hands, but the weight of the empty mesh was much heavier. His siblings were on ahead, bragging about how much they had caught and released between them, while Pill had nothing to show for his effort. They were running through the fields, and he wanted to be running with them, but the grass only grew between them. He wished desperately he could see beyond it, to catch a glimpse of the life beyond the rise, but it was lost in the green. A sinkhole reached up to trip him in that time, too, and in that time it had succeeded. His foot twisted at an unpleasant angle, not enough to break, but enough to keep him from walking comfortably. He cried out in pain, and only heard the laughter of his siblings in response. He cried out for help, called for them, but their voices were already gone, lost in distant winds. Young Pill, however, was a determined child. When it became clear that no one could hear him and that no one was coming for him, he started walking. The net might have been worthless to him as a butterfly-catching tool, but as a stick, it still served for walking. He propped himself on its end, lifting his aching foot, and limped slowly back the way he'd come. It hurt so much to walk that he started to cry. He kept going anyway. Home was just beyond the grass, he knew. They had been playing outside for hours, running mindlessly through the endless fields and forests, looping in circles all the while, but he always knew which way was home. The others would maybe start to worry about him if he didn't show for a few hours, but more likely they wouldn't notice his absence at all. Pill often wondered if he was a ghost, so great was his talent for avoiding notice. There was one person, however, who could always find him. As he limped back home, wiping his eyes on his sleeves to keep his vision clear, a pair of strong, heavy arms reached down to grab him under the arm and lifted him into the sun. Pill, fully grown and lost in the present, emerged to the other side of the brush just behind Chirp and the entomologist. His memory ended as quick as it began, replaced with a sudden, wondrous sight.
"It's beautiful," said the entomologist.
The small lake shone silver in the light of the rising moon, and purple skies reflected on waves that lapped in hushed whispers along the shore. Shapes danced in reflected light on the surface, and in darker silhouettes deeper below. A lone loon continued its long call, briefly breaking the reverent silence, and in the air all around them, and far into the trees and sky above, orange wings burned like embers where the monarchs held court.
"Got him," said Chirp.
His unsteady hand quieted in appreciation of the moment just long enough for Pill to gently take his net. The entomologist was unsteadied as well, and took a seat atop a small rock which to him could have been a park bench.
Well done, dear boy," he gasped.
His eyes turned small and beady when he took his glasses off to clean them, but for the first time, Pill could see the unobscured wonder shining in them as well.
"I suppose this
is where they're supposed to be," said Pill. The sounds of water lapping against the shores drove errant thoughts and memories from the forefront of their minds, and left all those in attendance in simple wonderment. They appreciated the sight for a time. Pill even forgot to watch for Chirp, but Chirp had forgotten his usual appetite for destruction, and instead remained transfixed on the sight as the last of the setting sun set fire to the wind, and the many orange embers began to fly south.
"Still want me to go after them?"
Pill asked quietly. He didn't stand, and held the nets tight when Chirp finally reached to grab one for himself. Pill's eyes were fixated on the entomologist.
I think I'll just sit here for a while," said the odd little man. "Take in the moment while it's still with me." "So we came all this way for nothing?"
said Chirp, who was now jumping and trying to catch the last of the flutterlings by hand. While not the most clever of geniuses, they were genius enough to stay above his flailings. "No," said Pill. "Not for nothing."
"But we didn't catch anything."
"And you don't have to," said the entomologist, setting his tools down beside him. He folded his hands into his lap and watched the forest, still smiling at the sight.
"I should have come out here myself years ago."
"You've never been?" asked Pill.
"Not since I was very young," said the entomologist. "They say nostalgia clouds our memories, rewrites them into idealized caricatures of happy moments rather than true recollections. I always assumed that was a differing mixture of truth and hyperbole varied on the thinker, but I suppose I always suspected my memories were happier than they really were. I didn't want to come out and destroy them with the cold light of truth, you understand." "He's saying a lot of stuff," Chirp whispered to Pill. "Are we catching butterflies or not?"
"No," said Pill.
"I recall long nights in the forest," the entomologist continued,
He dug a small notepad from his satchel and flipped through scrawled notes and musings before finding a blank page. His pen twirled in his hand with a small flourish as he set not to writing, but drawing. Seeing lights in the sky, stars and fireflies, and other things catching the last of the setting sun, I always assumed my memories of those times must be idealized, a dream unmatched by the visions of the forest, and so not worth pursuing again. I think now my assumptions were backward. Even my most vivid imaginings have never been quite this tranquil.
I'm bored, Chirp whined. Can we keep walking?
Yes, said Pill.
Don't wait up for me,
said the entomologist. A crude imitation of the forest was slowly working its way into his pages, his hands scribbling trees and water and the moon and its reflection and hundreds of tiny wings scattered in the air. It was messy work, Pill thought, scrawled in an unpracticed hand, but it was earnest.
I'll find my way back eventually.
What about our directions? Pill asked.
Go back the way you came through the forest, he said to them. Back the way we met along the road, there is a town ahead. I was heading there myself, actually, but it's still a bit of a walk yet. There are no twists or turns for you to lose yourselves in. Walk, and you'll find your way there assuredly. My own abode is even further away, I'm afraid. Otherwise, I would offer you shelter for the night.
Thank you, said Pill, taking Chirp by the hand. We'll be off then.
No,
said the entomologist, rubbing the bump on his head. He looked over at them before they vanished back into the forest.
Thank you. Both of you.
Pill nodded sheepishly and led Chirp back through the woods. Guided by the light and shadows of the rising moon, they made their way back to the road.